It was back in the day when we had, I don't know if you remember, we had the Deveny group. We had the guitars in the front of the, right on the altar.
Really?
Yep. Yeah, we had a harmonica and like 4 guitars, and it was a little bit even passe at the time. So it was, 1989? So it was past the Peter, Paul, and Mary stage, but that was kind of what it was. And we had all different books. We didn't have just the Gather book. We just did it from all different sources. So that's where it all started.
Do you think that was a lot of Father Mike's influence?
Probably, but I don't know how long they were there before I got to the parish. And Father Mike wasn't even the main priest at the time when we were meeting with him for our wedding. He told us, I might not be here. I might not be the permanent priest. We'll find out. And we were getting married within 2 months. So he said, I might not be the one marrying you. And I think he was just like, a visiting priest or something, or second in command or something.
Okay.
And but he ended up staying 10 plus years after that.
Loved him.
So then Father Stan came after Father Mike. And that's when I started playing, I think Desi was there the music director by that point. And Desi needed me to play organ on Sunday mornings because he was a doctor of organ performance. And that's why Father Stan hired him, because Father Stan loved the organ. So we switched to mainly organ back then.
Everything was gone.
Everything was done. The band was, it might have still been there, but it gradually weaned out. But it switched to mainly organ for everything, all the songs, unless it was maybe one contemporary song. So it was the song, the acclamation, the parts of the Mass, everything was organ. And I hadn't played organ since high school. So Desi gave me lessons, gave me a few lessons to brush up, and then I played full time for 10 years. So that's the history of me at OLL, and then my child went to school here, my oldest son, and then I got very involved. My husband died when he was 49 suddenly of a brain aneurysm, and so I wanted to get involved, more involved in the school. I actually was involved before that point. I was a helicopter mom, so I wanted to know everything that was going on with my son.
That's the best way to do it.
So I became the librarian, and I actually digitalized the library. We were on a card catalog system, and with the help of another gal that they recruited later, and I got volunteers, had tons of volunteers, and we did, I want to say it was a big number, like 10,000 books or something, that we had to put all the mark systems and make them up, because some of the books were so old, they didn't have mark systems in them.
Really?
But anyway, I was the librarian, and that way I had access to the teacher's lounge.
That's right.
Where I could find out what's going on.
Yeah, how are your kids doing?
Yeah, he did fine.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I subbed for Jackie Myers sometimes, not that often, but a couple of times in the music room if she, couldn't make it. But
So OLL has been a big part of your life.
Yes, yeah, it has. And now I'm subbing. I've been subbing for when Courtney was here. I did a lot of subbing for her, and Mel Scott. I'll do some subbing for him and choir practices. And I sing in the choir and I'm in the bell choir. So I try to keep my hands,
Somewhere
into
in
OLL, because I have 2 other churches that I play at. So, but it starts pretty much on the day my son drowned in Lake Minnetonka, my youngest one. And that day we went out on our boat and we hired a sitter. And I remember as we were cruising along the lake shore, I was looking at the big, huge mansions. And we live on Lake Minnetonka in a really small little shack. It's just one of those modest things. We just love the lake.
Yeah.
But I remember gazing at the the mansions on the side. And I had 2 boys. One was 4, one was almost 2. And I was dreaming and wishing for a bigger home for my little boys. I was dreaming for another child. I wanted another child. And I mean, I was praying to God for it. And what I didn't realize at home at that moment, my son was walking out my screen door and running into like Minnetonka. And I didn't realize that I would soon be looking back and wanting what I had. So what I learned from that over the years, it took a long time, is that there's always somebody worse off than you. Now my family was 4, it went down to 3, it went down to 2, and I just have to look at it like there are some people who don't even have, 2 in their family. You just have to appreciate what we have, and I don't pray to God for more anymore. I just try to pray for what I have.
Be thankful.
It was hard, and at first my husband didn't want to talk about it, and I had to talk about it all the time, and that was the way I got through it, was talking about it all the time and praying all the time. And I wasn't a big Bible reader per se at that point, but the only thing that got me through was reading the Psalms before I went to bed, and I had to put the Bible on my chest. After that was the only way I could get to sleep at night after Billy died. So,
Wow.
yeah, it was the Psalms and Job that got me through.
And that makes
I couldn't have done it without God. At that time, I was shaking one fist at God.
Absolutely.
While I was trying to reach with him for the other one because I needed him so badly. When my husband died suddenly at 49, 11 years later, I found out I was reaching out for him with both hands because I could let go of all that anger. I could let go, so I had both hands able to reach out. And I knew that I'd get through it because I got through my son's death and God helped me through it. So that was the difference between the 2 losses for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When Billy died, I started journaling. That's another thing that is so important when you're going through any kind of adversity, is to journal. I mean, I loved writing before that. I took a few writing classes in college and high school, and I was pretty good at it, but I never sat down and wrote until Billy died. And I wrote just what happened that day because I had to get it out of my head. We were on the boat when we got called. There's an emergency at home, and we go to the hospital, and I rocked Billy for the last time in the hospital, and I had to get everything that happened out of my head. So I wrote every little detail, and it eventually became like 400 pages. It became, it went on and on and on, and I couldn't stop. So I put it down in the memoir form, and I couldn't get a publisher to publish it, and I didn't have the money to self-publish. So I changed it up. So I changed it up to speak through my husband's voice and have my journaling after each chapter and the testimonies from the first responders after each chapter with more dialogue and the surprise ending. So then I found a publisher that was willing to publish my book and pay for the whole process. So I did find a publisher for that one.
Absolutely.
But the third book is I Am Widow, Hear Me Roar. And that one mixes the inspiration and the self-help with humor, because there's nothing funny about your husband dying, but there's a lot of funny things that happen to you after your husband dies, especially if you have a 14-year-old boy.
Oh.
That's how old he was when?
Yeah, he was 14, yeah.
That's a tough age, too.
And his dad was a stay-at-home dad. So he cooked for him, he coached for him, they were very involved, they were very close. So we're very lucky, and that's another thing, my husband lost his business 5 years before he died. He was trying to start a new one at home, but he was at home with my son for the last 5 years that he was alive, which was a blessing.
Yes.
It didn't seem at the time because, financially we were pretty strapped, but it was such a blessing that my son got 500% daddy years in before he died.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
What a great thing to look back on.
Yep. Yeah. So it's
You never know what's around the corner.
no, you don't. So live in the day and appreciate what you have. His dad died. It was like communication. Kids at that age, especially boys at that age, do not talk about things. And I couldn't get him to go to a counselor, couldn't get him to talk to anybody else. And so what I would do is, of course I cried a lot, and he would hug me. He would always come and comfort me and put his arms around me when I cried. And I realized that he wasn't just comforting me, but I was crying for him when he couldn't. And he liked it. He liked it because he could share in the grief without talking about it and without crying and being unmanly himself. Also, if there was something that reminded me of my husband, his dad, I would just say, oh, remember when Dad used to, mash the potatoes and, do all, and he'd say, yeah, and you did a lot better than you did. Or, he would comment on it and he would perk up. He wouldn't have to say, oh, I miss Dad so much, but he could hear me talk about things that he wanted to bury, and in that way, he didn't bury them. I would bring, remember, this is Dad's favorite movie. Or if it's something traumatic that happened to the kid, maybe kind of bringing it up in subtle ways. Only like a monologue, you're talking to yourself type thing. Because with the 14-year-old boy, you are kind of talking to yourself, right? It is kind of a monologue anyway. Right?
Yeah.
So that's the way I did it. And when Danny went through Billy's death when he was 4 years old, his greatest fear was losing his parents.
Yeah.
Because he didn't know what death was before that. But also, we became different people than he ever knew before. We were totally different after that. He was afraid we couldn't take care of him. So I would always say to him, I'm going to cry, and it helps me.
Yeah.
When I cry, I feel better after.
Yeah.
And will always be strong enough to take care of you. Always. No matter how hard I cry, I'll always be strong enough to take care of you. And he kind of switched the words around. He was almost 4. He wasn't even quite 4. And then he just turned 4 after Billy's death. And whenever I would cry with Billy's blanket on the couch, he would come over to me, put his arms around me, and say, crying makes you strong, Mom. Crying makes you strong, Mommy. Yeah, so he kind of twisted the words around a little, but it was true from the mouths of babes, right? It was more meaningful that way. It did. It made, you let it all out, and the pressure is out. And I was crying for him when he couldn't at that time too. But he did cry at 4 years old, and sometimes he wouldn't shut up about, the questions. What's God? What's heaven? Where is Billy now? So I would tell him because we'd go to Billy's grave. And I'd say, well, that's Billy's old body. We talk about it, an old body, and his new body is with God in heaven. He's got a new body will never die, and and that was the only way I could explain his body going into the ground. And he understood that. He understood that at 4 years old. Yeah.
Wow.
I needed God so badly, I couldn't be angry at him at the same time. Like I said, I was shaking a fist at him with one hand and reaching for him with the other. Well, the fist part didn't work. I wasn't getting any kind of comfort from that. So I had to start reaching for him more than being angry at. But if you're angry at God, that's okay. At least you believe in him and you're communicating with him.
Yeah.
It's better than totally turning your back to God. Yeah. Because that just means you truly believe that he may have made this happen, but I don't believe he did. I believe that it was just circumstances that happened. He knew it was going to happen, and then he helped me. Cried when Billy jumped in that water or went in the water, and then he cried with me after. And that's how I look at it.
Yeah.
I don't believe that it was the phrase meant to be. Of course, he knew it was going to happen. We have free will.
Yeah.
Billy had free will. God gives us free will.
Yeah.
So I came to the conclusion that he did not make this happen
Yeah.
to me personally. but he helped me through it. And that's where I had to go with that anger and let it go. Yes.
That things can be better.
That
You
is
get
the
better.
bottom line. I actually have the word hope in my living room,
Yeah.
up over my window in wood blocks. My sister-in-law gave me, right after Billy died, so it was 5 months after Billy died, she gave me little elves for Christmas. And I was thinking, oh, it's going to say Billy, or because all my siblings got, peace, love, and I thought, oh, she's going to give me blocks with Billy on it. She gave me with hope on it, H-O-P-E. And I thought, what does that mean? I had no clue what that meant. And years and years down the line, I kept taking those elves out, and I finally realized I know exactly. I lived it. I lived that hope. Now I know exactly what hope means. It doesn't, it's not like you're happy or you are looking forward to something. It means you're joyful despite your tragedies. And joy is different than happy.
100%.
Yeah, joy is just, it has God in it. Happy is just, you're content with what you have.
Yeah. In the now.
In the now, right.
Yeah.
And joy is
It's coming.
longer lasting. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It's just the message we need.
Yeah, especially now.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
Just